Hi, this is Adrienne from Alice Scraps Wonderland and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be showing you how I made a striped floral card using some of the new Tim Holtz Floral Elements stamps. To start, we'll just be covering a white card front with some Distress Oxide inks. I'll be blending the ink onto the entire card front for this project. For this tutorial, you can find a link to all of the supplies I've used in the description box below. And to make sure I don't get any fingerprints on the inked side, I'm just using a small piece of mint tape to rest my fingers on as I hold it in place. And I've also added my magnets to my magnetic craft mat to help hold that still. And just keep adding ink until you get the blend that you like and the color opacity that you desire. Next, I'm giving my ink a quick shot with the heat gun to set it. I'll be using Scrapbook.com's Pops of Color, Craft Scraper, and the Mixed Stripes stencil to add the stripes to the card. And we're just going to attach the stencil to the card with a little bit of mint tape. This will help hold it in place and you won't have to worry about it moving as you're applying the pops of color. I'm just squeezing out a little bit of pops of color across the stencil. You can always add more later. This is a very thin paint, so apply a very light pressure and also don't add too much pops of color. A little goes a long way. And you can see I'm just going back in and adding more as needed. And once you're happy with how your pops of color look, make sure to remove your stencil and the mint tape as carefully as possible, and then get your craft scraper and stencil into a bath of water right away so that you don't have issues with the pops of color drying on them. Next, we'll be moving on to stamping out the floral images. I'm using another flat white card front to stamp my images down onto, and I'm using my Tim Holtz stamp platform. You can use any platform that you have, or you can stamp out individually. I'm just trying to fit as many as possible at once and then picking those up. I'm using a little static pad to make sure that my embossing is pretty clean, and I'm using the Tim Holtz embossing ink. Ink up your stamps well and then press them down onto the piece of paper. I'm using the LDRS Stampendable tool to help make sure that I get them well, and then I apply a second coat of embossing ink and stamp again. I like to use a scrap piece of paper or something from the mail to place my card down onto so I can apply my embossing powder and then pour it back into the container. And I'm just giving a little tap on the back with my fingers, not too heavy, you don't want to knock everything off, and then emboss it with your heat tool. Once it's set, you can move on to watercoloring. This is actually a really simple process. I'm just going to be using saltwater taffy distress ink, and we're going to start by applying a light wash of color to all of the flowers. The goal with this technique is to build up colors slowly by applying layers, and that is what creates the different tone qualities of that particular ink. So you can see I'm going back in and I'm using a little less water than I did the first time to achieve a slightly darker color and applying that darker color where I want shading at. You can go back in as many times with more color and layers as you want. I think I used about 3 or 4 different layers depending on how large the flower was. And now you can see I'm moving on to all of the leaves, and I'm using peeled paint distress ink to color these in. And again, I'm just using the same process, starting out with a light wash of color and then going back in with less water and more ink to achieve those darker colors where I want them. Once you're happy with the final result of your watercoloring, set your card aside to dry for just a little bit. You don't want it to be wet in the next step, but it's okay for it to be damp. That next step is fussy cutting out all of your floral elements so that we can add them to the card with pieces of foam adhesive and create a dimensional look. If you've never done a lot of fussy cutting or don't think that you're very good at it, I have a blog where I share my tips on how to fussy cut like a pro, and I'll leave that link in the description box below. I actually find fussy cutting really relaxing. I turn on a podcast or a TV show or some music, and I just fussy cut to my heart's content. And it's a great way, if your mind is racing, to just focus on the task at hand and calm your mind as well. Next, we'll be adhering the card front onto the card base, and I'm just using the scrapbook.com dotted adhesive roller. It's great if you don't quite get your card placed perfectly. It's easy to pull it up and readjust it as this adhesive doesn't set right away. Next, I'm laying out my floral elements, how I'd like for them to be on the card so that I can see where I want to add the foam adhesive. I'll be using Distress Collage Medium Matte and various foam adhesives to adhere down my floral elements. I'm starting with the leaves and the buds that are tucked under the larger main flowers, and I'm just using a little bit of the square foam adhesive to pop on the back of those leaves. For this particular branch, I'm using a little bit of the Collage Medium and tucking that about where I want it. And then I'm continuing with more foam adhesive for the larger leaves. For some of these smaller leaves, I'm just cutting one of these foam squares in half to have it fit on the back of those thinner leaves. For the buds, I'm actually using 2 layers of foam adhesive on one side to pop them up just a little bit more than the leaves. And I take all of the larger flowers off and then just apply a small dot of the Collage Medium to the stems of the leaves to hold them in place. Next, I'm applying the 1/4 inch tape to the back of the smaller flowers and lining those back up without adhering them down. And the larger flower is getting 2 layers of the 1 inch tape to pop it up a little bit more. To adhere, I am starting with the outer flowers and working my way to the inside of the card to make sure that they're spaced evenly. I find that my tweezers come in handy to help me place those smaller flowers. And now onto the finishing touch. I'm adding a little bit of sparkle with these Pink Fresh Peach Fuzz gems. And I'm starting out by just placing them about where I want them, and then I'll go back in and adhere them with the glossy accents. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content from my channel.